You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. What if the zodiac isn't just about astrology, but also a blueprint for your body and health? Stay tuned for this fascinating episode. This episode contains adult subject matter and some listeners may be triggered by this content. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we explore a surprising perspective on how the body holds deeper patterns that influence our health and well-being. Our guest shares how years of experience in physical therapy and biomechanics led to an unexpected discovery that reshaped her understanding of how healing connects to the cosmos. 30 years of working as a physical therapist and athletic trainer, combining biomechanics and neurotheology with patients that no one else could figure out, gifted Melanie Weller a reputation as a vagus nerve expert and the body whisperer. She trained with nationally and internationally renowned experts and collected certifications and credentials like fine wines. Then she had a health crisis followed by a marriage crisis and a lawsuit crisis. Her credentials did not help her make sense of the nonsense in her life. Turning to astrology, Melanie was led to an extraordinary discovery and the research to support it. Our bodies are clocks that mirror the celestial architecture of the zodiac. Our wellness depends on synchronizing our nervous system with the cosmic dance of the solar system. She has used this information to take people out of pain, anxiety, suicide planning, and more. Melanie now teaches a revolutionary approach, uniting ancient and modern science in her heretical healing program. Here is my interview with Melanie Weller. Hi, Melanie. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because your body as a clock has been such an intriguing topic, and I absolutely would like to know more. I can't wait to discuss this with you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Petra.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Would you like to start with maybe a little bit about yourself and let our listeners know where your personal journey connects up with what you do today and what it is that you do today?
Sure. I have been in the athletic training and physical therapy worlds for over 30 years now. And for a long time, I've branded myself as a vagus nerve expert from decades before the vagus nerve was having its moment in social media as it is right now, and treating it as a pinched nerve within the body. One of the things your vagus nerve innervates is your vocal cords. And my childhood trauma is a lot about being forced to be in choir and then being forced by the choir instructor to mouth the words. And just that continuous humiliation in front of my peers that I had to do that, especially when there were quote unquote big performances. And I grew up in the DC area, so we sang sometimes at the Kennedy Center and had notable places. But I was always told explicitly that I had to mouth the words for those situations. And so it was never lost on me that I came to the vagus nerve. It's kind of the great love of my professional life, because I do think we all do the thing we need most to heal ourselves. And I was very fortunate, an amazing physical therapy education at the University of Southern California. Before that, I was at the University of Virginia doing athletic training. And I just had amazing, amazing teachers and then mentors after I graduated. And very early on, I ended up working with complex chronic pain patients and people that no one else could figure out. And through that and through just my own innate curiosity, I sought credentials and certifications and collected them like some people collect fine wines. I was just always like, wait, like, what can I study to learn more, to master this, to help figure out these people? And I always kind of straddled this world of all the evidence-based material and taking courses through Michigan State University's College of Osteopathic Medicine and things like that, and reading books like Anatomy of the Spirit with Caroline Myss, which really helped me understand all of my chronic pain patients when I read that, and integrating those two together, or at least asking questions. Like in Anatomy of the Spirit, she talks about how your first chakra is about your relationship with your tribe. So if I had somebody with knee pain or ankle pain or something like that, I would just ask them about what their social circle was like. Do you hang out? Do you have friends? Are you well supported? Do you like to be by yourself? Things like that. And those questions always seem to do something a little magical. They prime the pump for something really beyond my expectations to happen. And fast forward many years with me with lots of letters after my name, and my life was falling apart. I had a health crisis, marriage crisis, and lawsuit crisis in very close proximity. And none of my logic circuits were really helpful at making sense of the nonsense that was happening in my life. And I ended up turning to astrology to figure out what was going on. It was amazingly helpful to make sense of the nonsense that was going on. And there's a whole subset of astrology called medical astrology. And this is where I'm going to tell you a story before I unpack this statement. But what I discovered through astrology is that our anatomy, we are so made in the image of the zodiac, geometrically, literally through angles and shapes, that I ended up creating a form of energy medicine around that just got people better even faster. It was just this super fun, super highway to getting people better. And in the throes of all of this, I had a patient who walked into my office with his suicide plan for that evening. And I knew I had to bring more than just my evidence-based material to the table. And he didn't explicitly say that to me until after the session was over. He was living in this nightmare of hallucination. And I brought all of my best evidence-based skills. I brought all of my energy medicine skills. I unleashed my intuition on him in a way that was very moving for him and deeply, deeply meaningful. And 90 minutes later, he walked out 90% better. And I always say we saved each other that day, because since then, I've been on this mission to help people bring together their expertise and intuition. And I've been calling that fearless presence in the last few years. But when you do that, you're really able to create miracles, really. Whatever the predicted outcomes were, I feel like it's so much fun to have my expectations exceeded every single time with clients. And there are people still that I don't see people on their first rodeo usually when seeking help, but it's endlessly delightful to play this game with my patients, which I have played for decades and I didn't realize I was doing it. It was like, how easy can this get? And how good can this get? And I have taught neuroscience and nervous system regulation, very evidence-based before, and I've taught continuing education, lots of CEUs for healthcare professionals. But integrating these softer skills, the esoteric knowledge into it, is an accelerator for your outcomes.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that journey. And I agree, there is an ingredient that gets added when you utilize these esoteric methods and the knowledge and the wisdom. And some of this is very old knowledge and wisdom. It's not a new thing that we're inventing.
In my world, I think one of the most interesting things, because I deal with a lot of people with religious trauma, like that's part of my story. That was like the client I told you about in my introduction, like that was a huge part of his story. But as church attendance has plummeted, at least in the US, and I think that that's part of a bigger trend that's been happening too, nervous system regulation as an industry has come up. And we used to get great nervous system regulation exercises through church rituals. So we're always doing the same thing. Like we used to go to confession behind a screen for the priest, and now we confess to our therapist on the other side of a screen. Like we're always doing the same thing. We just repackage it in different ways.
It's really interesting that you say that, because I grew up Catholic, so I'm very familiar with that whole setting. And yeah, I guess there's something to be said for the community piece of it that happens, even though some other pieces can be triggering.
Oh, it is not without its problems, for sure. Right. We get that. But yes, humans will do anything to be part of the herd above everything else. Singing is a great vagus nerve exercise. And when you would look at your hymnal and look at the altar and look at your hymnal and look up at the altar, that near far exercise is a great nervous system exercise. And the smells of the incense and the sounds of the bells, and even prayer, You would label prayer academically an interoceptive exercise. There are really beautiful aspects to all of it. The hard part becomes when love gets weaponized in community. And that's really what, for the people, because I see a lot of people with religious trauma, that's really kind of the bottom line of all of the stories.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense to me. And I left the church a long, long time ago. So, yeah, I can identify with that. And there are, of course, pieces that happen to people that we need to make sense of, just like you were trying to make sense of nonsensical things. And all of a sudden, all our wisdom, all our academic knowledge just doesn't seem to reach there. So, I love the idea that you actually turned to astrology. How great is that? And the things you found there to help yourself and help others going forward. How does that tie in when you work with your clients or your patients and they come with these traumas to you? They come with maybe religious trauma or they come with their challenges, mental health challenges. Where do you start in this game that you're playing with them now? Where do you start when someone comes to you like that and they have a lot of things going on that maybe conventional methods just have not been able to help them with?
I always start by evaluating the clock, first of all. Even if we take the word astrology out of the mix here and we're just going to talk about the zodiac as constellations, the zodiac is a clock. The sun moves through and the moon move through those constellations. And the ventricles of our brain, which are the same shape as the ram's horns that represent Aries, they are the same shape. And our throat anatomy is the same shape as the Taurus bull. And we have heart anatomy that's the same shape as the symbol for Leo. And it works this way in the order of the zodiac from head to toe. So we have this internal clock or this zodiacal skeleton that you could also call it. And I've seen lots of people in suicide ideation and a couple in more in the planning mode. What they all have in common is that their clocks have stopped internally. And it takes some skill to be able to pick apart that they're like C1 and C2 joint in their top of their neck isn't moving really well. And that there are these, in the physical therapy world, we call them biomechanical or special tests, but they've got this head to toe thing happening. And even their visceral motilities are shut down. Like their organs don't feel like they're moving as they should from that. I've had a lot of osteopathic visceral mobilization training too. So we all have these internal pulses and it's just like everything has stopped inside of their bodies. And my hypothesis is that their bodies are telling their brain that it's dead. Then they want to match that on the outside. Because when you take away, when you get their clocks started, they don't want to end their lives anymore. That impulse goes away. I think that's the clearest example of how our bodies are clocks and in the way that it gets used. So in the neuroscience research, we know that basically every mental health disorder that is widely known that you would be able to name, a lot of neurological disorders, including Parkinson's and dystonia and even autism and somewhere on that line of mental health and neurological, you would even put eating disorders there, as well as all orthopedic injuries. So I'll say that coming out of the sports orthopedic world, all have time perception and processing issues. That's what they share. That is the common thread between all diagnoses. It's a time perception and processing alteration. Getting your body and your brain to be able to manage time, to move through time more effectively and efficiently is a very powerful approach. And it aligns very nicely with a lot of the trauma-informed somatic exercises that are out there as well. The same parts of the brain you might rehabilitate for time, you would also rehabilitate for trauma. Like, for example, your amygdala, which especially your right one is involved in fear. And your amygdala responds really well to eye exercises. So like therapists will use EMDR to help downregulate people's amygdalas. I've got my own set of eye exercises or exercises that historically were used for neurological patients in physical and occupational therapy have been repurposed by some people for this. And that's also what I have done. And like when you're about to fall or about to have an accident and you feel like time has slowed down, that's because your amygdala literally slowed down the time. So the eye exercises help your time perception and processing through your amygdala. Your cerebellum does sub 1 second units of time. So for me, I tend to, if I was going to give a general principle, like when I teach, I always teach people to start at the feet and start at the brainstem. Like there's a lot of correlation between your brainstem and your feet, but you start and then you can move forward in the brain. And that's often the safest way to methodically go through until you really know what you're doing and know how to manage things. But your cerebellum does coordination and accuracy. And if you're not organized in sub 1 second units of time, it's very hard to be organized in seconds and minutes and other hours and days. A lot of cerebellar exercises or exercises that have a component of that to them are really powerful at getting time regulated. And it can be as simple as tapping your thumb to your fingertips and syncing that with your breath, and maybe even playing some music in the background, because music has rhythm, has timing to it. And you can throw in a mantra if you want. In the neurotheology research, they do sa, ta, na, ma. They just spiritualized a Kundalini mantra, basically. And people that have some pretty serious neurological conditions like Alzheimer's and dementia and Parkinson's, it creates profound improvements in their memory and their movement to do that very, very simple exercise. There's this bringing together of like how our bodies are clocked with the astrology and then how your brain actually perceives time. But I will say, if your cerebellum, if your ram's horns that represent Aries are not sitting right in your head, it can be really hard to organize your exercises as easily. I find that people get more out of doing less if I can help them get their zodiacal skeleton, or that their clocks aligned. And this works at so many levels. It works down at the cellular level with a molecule of ATP is the same shape as the Aries constellation, and it's the same archetypal function. And sometimes there's tension in between how our ATP are working and how ATP functions in the sky. And your brainstem and cerebellum in the Vedic system are associated with the Hindu deity Ganesh. And if you look straight on at the brainstem cerebellum, it looks a lot like an elephant's head. And sometimes your elephant energetically is just not sitting in your brain in an ideal way. But when you can get that energy aligned, it makes the whole body relax. I understand all the training and performance guidelines and things like that, and that we do get better at whatever we practice. But I think that a lot of times we really push the boulder up the hill when we don't. That like, okay, yeah, you need to do some exercises to get better, but maybe you don't have to do as many. Well, like, how can we make this process as efficient as possible? And I have lots of people that get better in one visit or two visits or three visits with and very honestly, because they feel so much better, don't do very much afterwards to get better. So I understand the importance of training and doing that. We have to learn to do something different often. But I also think that sometimes we don't. And sometimes it's just that simple as getting things a little bit better, getting things in line. And then you become nervous system regulation. Then you become the exercise that you need to do. Then you start walking and emptying the dishwasher and brushing your teeth in the ways that are supporting your nervous system already.
Yeah, this is fascinating. I've never heard about this approach before, and I'm completely fascinated by this. So, as you're explaining this, I broke my foot about 4 years ago, and I became extremely clumsy after. I have really no sense of balance left. And as you're explaining how that matches up with the brain, we go from the feet, we start at the base of the brain, we go forward. It's starting to make a lot of sense to me why this is happening. It's absolutely fascinating. And I hear by what you're explaining that this is also a very non-invasive and gentle way for people to take charge of their own healing and actually address various things, not just mental health challenges or struggles like where they actually want to plan suicide, but also physical challenges that might be going on with them since their clock has stopped. If we can get that going again, I would imagine also physical things would help resolve.
As a physical therapist, that's really kind of, people don't come to me because they're contemplating suicide. They come to me because their doctor sent them, because often they're psychiatrists, because they had back pain or something like that. And then if I evaluate them and I feel like they're locked up to the point that they might be contemplating suicide, I ask, now because I'm like, that doesn't scare me anymore. I'm old enough and experienced enough. And one, I can help unlock them. And two, I can help them get that better help from other people as well. And the answer, when I get somebody who's really locked up in that way and ask them if they're contemplating suicide, I always get one of two answers, either yes or no, but I feel like I'm dying on the inside. There is that sense of that, still this very strong sense of death goes with that, what I really think is very much living in rigor mortis.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that. And I hear that from a lot of my clients as well, is that they do feel like they are dying on the inside and they're doing all the things on the outside to keep going and to keep up the pretense of, okay, I have a job, I take my kids to school, I do this, that, I clean up the house because these are things that make me feel functional. But there's a whole disconnect when it comes to the inside, and we're not really living on the inside. We're not thriving, we're not flourishing, we're kind of dead on the inside. As a physical therapist, and you've described some of the exercises, also like tapping the fingers, anything else that you start your clients with? Because I can imagine that for some people, this might be a whole new perspective to them. They may have not considered energy work before, or they may have not really had a big dive into this type of approach. So, where can listeners start? If this is something totally new to them, how can they dip their toes into this to get this knowledge a little bit further along for their own health?
Well, I'll describe one more exercise, but really, I have a workbook on my website that's free. It's called Zodiac, the Zodiac and the Vagus Nerve, and you can download it, and it is full of exercises. And it describes how your vagus nerve gets pinched at the intersection of zodiac signs, which also are where we have horizontal anatomical structures. And there's all sorts of exercises in there to help with that. So I encourage people to go to melanieweller.com and download that workbook. And that's the easiest or the biggest way that you can dip your toe in for that. So my favorite exercise for unlocking often gives a huge systemic shift in the body, I call helical breathing. When we get traumatized, rotation's the first thing that we give up. And we live in this rotational universe, and we've got to be able to rotate to be in line nervous system to solar system. And the research around how that works is pretty gosh darn amazing. I'm going to give a set of instructions here. And please do not multitask as you follow those. Please stop whatever else you're doing. Don't be driving and operating kitchen tools and things like that as you're doing it. So stop and be present if you're going to do this exercise as I describe it. But if you sit on the edge of a chair and sit up nice and tall and cross your left ankle over your right, and then take your right arm and reach it across your body as best you can towards the outside of your left thigh, and left hand behind your head. And if you can, create a little bit of tension there in a good posture there, not in a slouchy, lax posture. You're going to inhale for a count of 3, hold for a count of 6, and exhale for a count of 12. When you inhale, I want you to inhale into the back side of your heart, which is kind of, think like between your shoulder blades. So you're going to expand your rib cage back behind you, and then hold. And if you can't, you can count as fast as you can if you need to. If you can't, hold your breath for 3 and then 6. And then long exhale like you're blowing out through a straw. And doing that, honestly, just 3 to 5 times. And I should have set this up better, but if you test how your neck moves or how your shoulder moves, or maybe you would check how your foot moves before, and then do the exercise and then reassess and see if it's better afterwards. But that's a really nice way to get vagus nerve decompression at multiple levels. It also works because in all humans, the right side of our diaphragm has more muscle mass than the left. So the right side will always win. So a lot of us, because most of us are right-handed, and even if we're not, we live in the left-handers live in our right-handed world, that we get stuck in this right diaphragm dominance. And that can contribute to right shoulder pain, to right hip pain. It can contribute to hiatal hernia issues. It's just a huge asymmetry in the body. So if you can undo that a little bit, that can make a big difference as well.
I love all the wisdom coming out. That's wonderful. I'll tell you, I was doing the exercise alongside Melanie, and know that you guys can't see me, but I was placing my hands and doing the breathing. And actually, when I uncrossed, I started feeling really dizzy just for a few moments. I can feel my energy sort of rearranging itself and coming through the body. So definitely don't drive or do anything like she said. Take the time to be present with this. But I think you will feel a shift already just by doing this one exercise. So thank you for
You're
sharing that.
welcome. Yeah, this is always what I give people. I tell them when if you helped somebody move furniture and you think, oh, I'm going to pay for that tomorrow, this is a great exercise to not have to pay for the helping your friend tomorrow. Unsticks a bunch of things. And sometimes I will throw in that exercise also my favorite Indian proverb that I think is the truest description of how time works relative to our bodies. And they say, your future is behind you, propelling you forward. And your past is in front of you, waiting for you to make peace with it and clear your way. So when you inhale into the backside of your heart, really reach for that good future that has your back, that's supporting you, and bring all of that into alignment, because I think we often think that our future is our prey. And I think what really happens is our future is its prey. I never, ever in a million years thought that astrology would be part of my practice. Even for all the woo-ish stuff that I did, it was all still what I would label like evidence-based shamanism, that it was just the research-backed tools that have existed forever. So you just don't always end up where your future will catch you.
Yeah, actually, that's a really nice thought to be breathing into the back of our heart because, of course, the heart brain connection has to do with the vagus nerve, also heart rate variability and all that. So I find that a really comforting sort of image to be breathing into the back of my heart and connecting with that future that has my back. I love that.
And for people with anxiety, or I'll say maybe depression too, but I'll say particularly with anxiety, they do not move on the backside of their rib cages at all. And the way they do breathe is reinforcing their fight and flight responses. They are basically telling their brain with each of their 21,000 breaths a day that they are running from danger. Being able to breathe into the backside of your heart not only gives your vagus nerve more mechanical freedom, but it also starts to tell your brain that you're safe.
Yeah. And we do, I guess, kind of get stuck in this survival mode or stopping the clock, as you've called it, also. Have a lot of people tell me that when they are anxious, depressed, or when they're struggling even with chronic illness or chronic pain, that they have these unexplained body aches and pains that just feel like they're just in a cage. And I think literally like what you said, there's a lack of that movement where that used to be before, and then it gets all locked up. And as you've explained in your experience, that's where the problems start.
The way I describe it is very consistent with the explanation of how qi moves in Chinese medicine too. And I come out of the trauma-informed world and have taught a lot of that. And I don't want to minimize how important that type of care is. But we will never sell the whole world on trauma-informed care because not everybody wants to deal with their trauma. And the evidence overwhelmingly says that there's no value in rehashing your trauma, that you have to basically repattern the present and move forward. But there's plenty of rehashing the trauma that's still going on everywhere. If we think about what kind of time we would like to have in our lives, like, do we want more playtime, more family time, more spiritual time? I live in New Orleans and it's Mardi Gras time right now. And I have parades coming through literally like a block from my house every night now for the next week. And that it's party time, parade time, or let your freak flag fly time. And do we need more structured time? We can really look at these ancient systems to see what parts of the body were associated with those things and help to treat that part of the body to unlock that aspect of time for the person. And the heart is a really great example because, and I relate to this very personally because having suicide ideation is part of my own journey. And in the 90s, if I'd gone to the right doctor, seen someone about it, I would have been maybe diagnosed with anxiety. But we didn't have the vocabulary for these things in the way that we do now. But I would have told you, and I did tell people that I had said, oh, I'm going to die of a heart attack. And I could point to the spot where it was going to happen in my chest. There's something happening here. And I know that somewhere down the line, I'm going to have a heart attack. And this is the part of my heart that's going to explode. Historically, I suck at play. It's just not been my thing. But the Leo constellation which rules the heart in astrology, is associated with play. So doing all these heart-centered exercises has actually been really good for me to increase my playfulness, because I would like to be more playful or not so incredibly serious as a very serious child. I think we can sell people or teach people that if you want, and motivate people that if you want a different particular kind of time in your life, then here are the exercises that might unlock that for you. And we can be very prescriptive about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. And I'm kind of going through in my head, I'm a Gemini. So I don't know what that means for what I need or want in that particular way. But yeah, it's fascinating to hear how all of these things correlate and also correlate back to these ancient systems that have been in place, like Ayurveda, like Chinese medicine, that also work with the energies in the body and how we can connect that all together.
I find that these systems really don't compete with each other at all. And modern medicine does some amazing things. I'm not somebody that's going to be entirely dismissive of modern medicine as kind of an alternative practitioner. I mean, people have real stuff that happens in their lives that's hard, and chemotherapy and different interventions can make huge life-saving differences for people to give you more time to figure things out. And I think we really are at a point where everybody's ready to have them be less competitive with each other. And what I think is really so beautiful about the ancient systems is that they have rituals and things that kind of honor the time where you are. When you're in they'll say, like, particularly in Vedic astrology, if you're in a Saturn phase, man, that might be really intense. But then they've got rituals to sort of soften that energy. And some people may buckle down on prayer without even recognizing Saturn as a thing. But I do think there's incredible value in ritual and routine. We are definitely wired for that. And these old systems, and I will even include the Bible in this, are full of stories. And we are not wired for facts. We are wired for stories. We are made from story because our bones are literally made from the stardust of exploded stars from billions of years ago. And we have been storing the stars for all of time as humans. And there's some evidence that just as we learn from the universe, that the universe learns from us too. And I know that when you treat somebody's physical body, sometimes their story will change. But when you treat their story, their physical experience of the world always transforms. Being able to see yourself in somebody else's story and see somebody else's story running through your life is just endlessly jaw-dropping and empowering. And I learned about a new asteroid recently and went and saw where it was in my chart, and it was about playing the role of the victim that totally punched me in the gut. I was like, oh, that is true. I was named after Melanie in Gone with the Wind, and my mother is so Scarlett O'Hara, even has some family land. That story has played out very heavily through my life, but it's also very similar to the Egyptian myth of Isis and Osiris. And the Egyptian myth of Isis and Osiris was the story of the Earth's precessional cycle. They just communicated their science and stories so people would remember it. I think all of our great movies, our great books, great stories are cosmologies. They follow that pattern, whether they know it intentionally or not. And this story continues to play out in my life because my adult son's girlfriend is Scarlet, and so I'm getting to re-Scarlet my life. I cannot escape this story. But I can certainly choose how I interact with it. I can influence how it lives in my body and how it competes with my own nervous system, because that's really where the problem is. I used to be really angry that my mom named me after Melanie in Gone with the Wind because she was so nice, because I was like, that's just gross to be named after somebody who's so nice. Like, that was not appealing to me. It's like when you're named after somebody who's a little bit of a rebel. And it was like not living very smoothly in my body. Like, I have peace with it. That story, I've been able to layer in, use the neuroscience information and use the story information and test and retest it in my body so that that story just doesn't compete with my brain or my body and live rent-free inside of me.
Yeah. And storytelling can be a big part of healing also, and resolving our traumas, or writing out our stories. So yeah, I definitely hear you on that and feel like that's a big part of our healing, when we get to tell our stories, when our stories are heard and seen, and then we can change them and we can heal them. So big physical changes too on that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Being witnessed is so important. And at least here in the US, we heal in secret for the most part.
Mm.
There's all these HIPAA laws and everything, and we don't typically heal in community very well. It's hard to ask for help. It can be hard to be vulnerable like that. But absolutely, storytelling is, and story writing and story listening is just so incredibly important. And you would not go to a movie, read a book, watch a TV show, and rave about it to your friends if it did not have enough contrast in it, because it would be boring. And contrast is the language of the nervous system. Neurons fire, they don't. They work on an all or nothing rule. There's no in between. And your nervous system will not let you live a dull story. And I think that's like, we are here for the contrast more than anything else. And actually, as a Gemini, I think Geminis are really good at the contrast. And my favorite aspect of Gemini is that, so in Chinese medicine, the lungs hold grief. And in astrology, Gemini rules the lungs. And the story of the Gemini twins is really one of grief, when one of the twins is mortal and one is immortal. And when the mortal one dies, the immortal one asks Zeus to put them together in the sky, or to give his brother half of his immortality so they can be together longer. And I think our deepest grief is for our mortal relationship with our immortal self.
Yeah. You touch a nerve there. And I feel that. I feel that actually in my lungs as you're talking about that.
Yeah.
But I think maybe when we're younger, we're not so much aware of that relationship. But I feel like as we're getting older, at least for myself, and becoming more aware of that relationship and actually becoming more aware of all the different layers to ourselves, that becomes a huge part of our story, and it becomes a huge part of healing or not healing and what's going on in our lives. Yeah, absolutely.
I think when we're really young, we actually remember it quite clearly.
Yeah, yeah.
Somewhere around 6, 7, 8, the neuroscience would say that we're all hallucinating. Reality is just a hallucination we agree upon. And I think somewhere as a child, we come into agreement with the collective hallucination and lose some of that connection. But that sense of time, of our eternal nature, all belief systems, whether you believe we live eternally or you believe it all ends when we die, are about our relationship with time. And that drives how we spend time here. You know, like in the most tragic of ways, because I work with world of religious trauma, you see parents that won't communicate with their adult children because they're not towing the religious party line. And the parents think that they're going to spend eternal time in hell for communicating with their children. But they make that choice about how they're spending their time here. I think time for us, for all the time science around it being or the talk around it being a construct, and there's lots of juicy time science that I could talk about. But I think that we're kind of like fish that don't know the water exists. I think we are swimming in time and we don't really realize it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think you have given us a whole new perspective on how to look at healing our bodies, our relationship with time, our relationship with ourselves, and how we can bring that all together. And I think our listeners are probably really curious at this point on how they can connect with what you've been talking about. Do you offer any programs or services, or how can our listeners connect with you if they'd like to know more, or even if they'd like to try some of this work in their own lives?
Yes, there are a few different levels. I've got some free offerings on my website. My Substack is very inexpensive, for as little as $5 a month. And I do group energy clearings or healings twice a month. And with some teaching, you get to hear me talk about what's going on as well. And I usually give a couple people some love seats, so you get a chance for some individualized attention too. Once a month, I do a free event that's called Rewiring Religion, where I teach a lot of that. And then I have a program that I called Heretical Healing that's open. People can join anytime, but where I really teach you how to do this for yourself and also teach practitioners how to use it in their practices, and particularly for healing religious trauma. There's a lot of overlap between religious, institutional, and authoritarian trauma in terms of the nervous system. So like if you had really authoritarian parents but didn't go to church, still your brain might be acting the same way as someone who had religious trauma. And certainly in the world, we're seeing a lot of authoritarian behaviors in our leaders popping up in different places. To me, the most revolutionary thing that we can all do is get to know our inner authority. And that's what spirituality is. And the research overwhelmingly shows that there is nothing more potent than spirituality for your physical health and mental health. And instead of being able to going forward through the hero's journey, we've got to start working backwards through it and starting with spirituality. And that's what my book is centering around. And that's how you can work for me. But it's all at melanieweller.com.
Amazing. And do you have a podcast, Melanie, as well?
I do. It's been called Fearless Presence the last few years. And I'll say, I think I'm going to rebrand it Heretical Healing because I think I'm a little more tapped into my inner rebel.
That sounds great.
In the name. And my people that are my people really like that name, and it's really just about not settling for the conventional wisdom. It takes an average of 18 years for what's found in research to become standard practice in medicine. If you don't want to wait 18 years for your miracle, that may still never get out of the box. And we only see the top 20% of research. I had a neuroscientist tell me, based on the research, the way that he describes it is that your doctors are treating you with a 20-year-old cell phone at 20% capacity. And these ancient, timeless techniques can be used, and you can learn how to test and retest this on yourself. They are not dangerous. They can be very methodically applied to get you better from whatever you need to get better from, but also to just be more grounded in your own self and enjoy your life, because life will hand you a coffee that you don't think you ordered. That's always going to happen. When I talk about my lawsuit latte. You will get handed something you didn't order, but you can always have your fearless presence with it, and you can use your heretical healing to get through it.
Yeah, that sounds great. And of course, we will be linking to all of Melanie's offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to check there on how you can connect with her, the programs she has available, her book, and also how you can listen to her podcast. I would imagine that we can do that from any of our favorite podcast providers that are out there. So I encourage you all to take a listen, take a look, and see if this is something that you might want to add to your own life. Very often we are stuck in a position where we just haven't found any answers, and this might be something new for any one of us to try, especially things like the broken foot, which was supposed to heal and then never did, and all those kind of mystery things that just don't seem to have an answer. And then we start diving into it in a bit more of a whole body approach and an energetic spiritual approach, which, like you said, can be amazingly powerful. So I hope our listeners have enjoyed our dive into your body as a clock, and it has been absolutely mind-blowing. I have learned so much in this time that we have spent together. And I just want to thank you, Melanie, for joining me today and sharing all this wisdom that you have gathered over the years with our listeners, with myself. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. I wish with my karmic backstory is lost voice and my childhood story is lost voice. I thank you because I know I get a big piece of healing when somebody shares their platform with me so I can use my voice. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for all this wonderful work you do. And I can't wait to find out more and connect with your offerings and connect with your book and your podcast. This is such a great topic, and definitely I think a lot of people can use this in their lives. So thank you again. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episode, and take care, Melanie. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.